We're being broadcasted tonight by our co-hosts, the Rollins College WPRK, right there, and the Winter Park Voice with the Ann movie right over there. So it's a pleasure to have all of you here this evening. First, thank you to the Rollins College administration for all of your support today, particularly President Cornwell and Mrs. Cornwell. And to the always helpful and inspiring staff of the Center for Leadership and Community Engagement, without whom I wouldn't have a job, and all of the Democracy Project student ambassadors for their incredible work in helping students navigate the often complicated and confusing process that is democracy. I would also like to thank the Winter Park Chamber of Commerce President Betsy Gardner-Eckford for being with us today. Of course, I would also like to thank both of our candidates, incumbent Greg Seidel, let's give him a hand, and challenger Wes Naylor for being willing to partner with our initiative on this endeavor. It's my honor to serve as your moderator tonight, and as such, I will ask the candidates a series of questions which they will each have 3.5 minutes to respond to. At 30 seconds remaining, our timekeeper, Ambassador Kenzie Hellman, will hold up this yellow sign, and when time is elapsed, she will hold up this spread out. So without further ado, we can begin. My first question,
Do the introduction.
Yep. Can you introduce yourself?
Easy question, and Wes and I both talked about stand up for the introduction. We'll sit for the rest of the time. But first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. I'd like to thank Rollins College for putting on this event. I'd like to thank Destiny for doing all the work she did to coordinate this and get this event together. Rollins is a great partner for the city, and we appreciate everything that they do. I was elected 2 years ago, and during that time, the development was a very divided issue within the city. Since I've been elected, what I've been able to do is get the neighbors and the developers to talk to each other, resolve their issues before they come to the planning, before they come to the city commission. And what we've had is resolved is really smart development. The other thing I focused on is our transportation. We have a transportation advisory board now that is going, as we move forward with our mobility plan, is going to look to implement a lot of the smart city features and what we need to have to make traffic flow smoothly here in town. The other item that was the undergrounding, that's kind of what I campaigned on last time, and trying to get that done in a faster way. We did have a few issues, and I got involved in that, and changed our management of the undergrounding and developed a new plan. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully find a way to get that new plan accelerated also. I am from this area. My father moved down here in '75 when I was 8, and he worked on the Navy base, and there was 6 of us in the family, and he couldn't afford a house in Winter Park, so we grew up in Altamont Springs in our 6-bedroom house. But we did come down here a lot. I went to fish on Dinky Dock. I did feed peacocks on Sundays after church. Got my first paycheck from Cumberland Lumber, where I used to sort nails on a Saturday morning for my neighbor back when I was about 14. So Winter Park's been a strong part of my background, and I actually moved to the city 20 years ago when I met my wife. We have 2 daughters. One's in 10th grade at the high school, the other's in 8th grade at Leonard Middle School. We own a company here in town. Our company is located downtown. Our house is actually just on the other side of the lake here. We're actually working on a house that's on the lake, and I'm excited to have the view of one of the most beautiful campus in the country. Rollins is a very great asset to have, especially when you look across the lake at it. So, the reason I got involved in the city commission is because I love this city. The city is going through some changes. I wanted to have a voice in that, and I wanted to look to bring people together to make sure that Winter Park can continue to be the best this city that it is and do great things. So thank you. I'll to your question.
Well, thank you. Good evening. For those that I haven't met, my name is Wes Naylor. My background is really pretty simple. I've been someone who's been in public service for almost all of my adult life. I came to Winter Park about 5 years ago. I've been in the Navy for almost 23 years at that point in time, and I've served a career as a naval aviator and as a Navy businessman for almost 28 years. My final assignment here in town was running the Naval Air Warfare Center Training Systems Division, which is located out in the middle of the research park, adjacent to the University of Central Florida. For those who aren't familiar with what that facility does, it's our job to look 20, 30 years into the future and take a strategic look at how we're going to train next generation of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and marine so that they can accomplish their missions, return back home, and reintegrate into society and live great lives. I often would talk about if we were doing our job correctly, I'd have people think of a scene of a ship coming home and a father running off the bow of the ship to greet his child and his wife who they hadn't seen in 10 months, or someone returning home from an army deployment and having that same reunion with their family. If we did our job and we were giving them the skills they needed to do their job safely and return home, then we were doing our job correctly. And that's something that I was very proud of. Now that's a big part of the industry here in Central Florida as well. The military side of that alone, in supporting our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who go overseas, brings almost $5 billion a year. And that contributes to a 10,000 job base of people involved in that industry. You know, 27 years ago when we moved off the old recruit training center just south of this location, out to the Central Florida Research Park, we were the first people there. And there really was no industry around that. But through partnership at the state, local, county level, that grew 300 industry partners around us and spawned the modeling and simulation business that now also supports the themed entertainment industry, EA Sports, and a number of other cutting-edge technologies that have become headquartered here in Central Florida. Now that was a great opportunity, and we ran a large workforce of about 1,200 folks. That was a tremendous team doing the work for our country and for those that we served. The other part of the job I had out there is I was the commanding officer of the base. And what that job essentially boils down to is being a city manager. I was responsible for the safety and security of the workforce there. Our 1,200 people, 1,200 Army personnel that were out there, approximately 400 Marines, and another 80 Air Force people who were there to do the job of their services. And we were important. We were charged with the safety and security of that, making sure that the facilities were taken care of, all the real estate transactions that would go with that. So this job's very relevant to what we're talking about in the role of the City Commission in supporting the city manager and the type of government we have. Now, a lot of people have asked at the end of the day, though, why are you doing this? That's a tremendous question. I have absolutely no financial interest in it whatsoever. I'm not a developer. I'm not a real estate investor. I don't do any business with real estate developers or investors. There's absolutely no financial gain to me in this at all. In fact, I've said and repeatedly say, the salary of $2,400 a year, my entire intent with that is to put it into a nonprofit that serves the citizens of Winter Park. Probably most particularly into anti-bullying efforts, because as the father of a 10-year-old daughter, I see what that can do. I witness the damage that can do over a long period of time. And it's that 10-and-a-half-year-old daughter that's the real reason I decided to run. I was fortunate to grow up in a city very much like Winter Park. And being here in Central Florida and serving on the boards that I serve on, like the Central Florida Partnership, I got insight to the change that's coming here over the next 20 years. We're projected to have 1 million plus more people coming to the Central Florida corridor. And I witnessed that in Northern Virginia where I came and grew up. My little town managed to maintain its character. A lot of little towns didn't. And we're now full of 40-story glass office buildings. And that's wonderful in the right place. In downtown Orlando, where we have that scape and it's the center of a major metropolis, that's appropriate. But it's not appropriate for what's being done here in Winter Park and for the character of the town. And I just want to be able to bring my skills in strategic visioning, strategic planning, to help make sure we have a long-term look at that and work with our businesses, our development partners, our citizens, to make sure that we continue to develop Winter Park in a way that keeps that unique, charming character. It'll also bring other issues. We've been seeing the rise of crime. I know being a part of the Rollins community, and I'm a student and an instructor here, we get the messages about the break-ins in the cars. You've seen it, you've heard about it. We've been seeing a rise in that. And I think that's something that we need to take a look at, because that goes to the character of what Winter Park is going to be moving forward as well. But in the end, you know, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'm someone who loves Winter Park. I served for 28 years where the Navy decided I should serve. And it came to the point in my life where I got to choose where I wanted to serve. And I decided that Winter Park was the place that I wanted to give back and make that forever place for my family. So thank you again so much for setting this up this evening. It's wonderful to have so many of my fellow students and administrators come out this evening to participate in democracy, because participation is what it's all about. Thank you.
And just one quick thing before we continue. If y'all could all silence or put your cell phones to vibrate, that would be great, just so we don't distract the candidates while they're speaking. And on to the next question. What is your plan to continue sustainability as a focus for Winter Park, and how do you intend to move that forward, improve upon what's already been done?
The question I had was economic development. Is that a different question? I'm happy to answer the one you asked.
No, we can take economic development.
Well, no,
No, it is supposed to be economic development.
Okay.
All right,
that's okay, I was just checking. You know, and as you saw here, you know, things aren't always perfect. And that's one of the things I do, is I ask the questions to make sure I'm understanding what the question is, and so I can provide that correct answer. But, you know, one of the things that, you know, we have here in the city of Winter Park is we have a great product. We have a city that has culture, we have a city that has beauty, we have a city that has all these activities. So, you know, when you talk about fostering economic development here in the city, the important thing is that we maintain what we have in the city. And so we have a lot of development pressure, and it's important that we plan for that development, and that we plan it in such a way that it doesn't impact the quality of our life here. You know, one of the things I always tell people about economic development here is that, you know, we put our office in downtown Winter Park for one specific reason, is we wanted to hire the brightest and the best that our country has to offer. And so if you can bring them to an office in downtown Winter Park, and they can go to lunch on Park Avenue and walk down Park Avenue, and these younger kids can take the train from downtown Orlando or the train from DeLand or Deltona to get to our office, they're going to want to be here. And so not only is that helped our firm hire and attract quality talent, we've grown our firm to about 24 people now, that, you know, the average hourly rate is about $35 per hour. I consider that good economic development for the city. But we also, I bring my clients, I bring my sub-consultants, we have meetings at our office, and the first thing they say to me is, wow, this is great. This is an awesome place to have an office. And I've actually had one of the firms actually move into Winter Park now, and another firm looking to move here. So, you know, Winter Park sells itself. So as long as we can keep what we have here, I think economically we'll be very good. The other thing is the reaching out to the younger folks, the young millennials, if you will, and the young entrepreneurs, and, you know, making sure that they want to be a part of this. One of my neighbors, Chase, he has his multi-media company here in town, and he's the type of person that that we want those type of people to come here, and they have a different lifestyle than my parents had, and they have a different lifestyle than I had, and we need to make sure we attract that lifestyle. One of the things to do that is our fiber optic backbone that we're talking about installing. This would be something where, when we opened our office, I actually had to pay to get mine installed. We have an office in Tallahassee and an office in Sydney, Australia. And for those who know computer file size, I usually send 1 or 2 gigabytes back and forth to Sydney, Australia. Well, that takes a long time unless you have a very good high-speed internet connection. So we actually paid for the one to get the high-speed internet from Park Avenue to our office, and then after I did that, all the companies around jumped on and got it for much less, and they're sharing my bandwidth now. But so I think that's something we really need to look at and see if we can bring that into the city, because you know, connectivity in this computer age is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Winter Park in a lot of ways does sell itself. But as I've seen in emerging industries, you can never just sit on your laurels. You always have to be leaning forward, whether that's Rollins College or whether it's the town of Winter Park. Nothing stays static. You have to engage in active efforts to shape your future. Now, economic development is something that's vitally important. As we said, there's 1 million plus people coming to Central Florida because it's the #1 market in the United States, or #2 depending on which magazine you're reading, but there's a lot here to love. There's a tremendously educated workforce. And what Rollins is doing, especially in looking at social entrepreneurship and sponsoring those type of efforts in partnership with Edith Bush and in partnerships with the Grammar School, provides an excellent basis for us to reach out, not only externally, but internally, to our population here in Winter Park and build a future for economic development. Because as we touched on, sustainability is going to be part of that, and that's the driving force behind a lot of the entrepreneurial efforts going on here at Rollins College. But it also takes someone who has a background in doing economic development. A part of my job in running the Warfare Center that I had was to find work for the 1,200 people we had there. Unlike many government organizations, we did not just have a check stroked to us each year and said, go do your work, you're part of the United States government. We were what was called a working capital fund organization, which meant we actually had to go out and do the business development, find the work, bring it in-house to our people, assign that work, monitor the work to execution. That's a different job if you're not used to doing that. And it can't all be done locally. You have to be able to have external relationships to make that happen. We're currently undergoing a realignment of what was the Orlando EDC and another organization, the Central Florida Partnership, that I've been fortunate to sit on the board of for the past 3 years. And the two of those together bring a lot of tremendous capability, and they look at the important things, like quality of life and quality of work, and how we maximize that to get the type of jobs where we want them to be. Now, in Winter Park, we have a highly educated workforce. We have primarily a services-based economy here. We certainly do have a need to get better connectivity with the world because financial services industry, the modeling simulation, the gaming industry, e-commerce type industries demand that type of backbone behind it. And that is something that we can also do to improve our attractiveness in the economic development range. Now also, it does get down to Park Avenue being Park Avenue, Central Park being Central Park, the lakes being the lakes, the shade trees being shade trees. People want to come to Winter Park for that feeling. That makes it very easy to recruit. But you have to be able to go out and tell that story in partnership. And that's something we could probably do better as well. Partnership with a new entity that's doing economic development, so we have better insight as to what companies we can bring in that will bring those type of skills, so that we're bringing in jobs that pay $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year to support the folks who want to live and work here and provide a better future for those who are graduating out of institutions like Rollins. Thank you.
All right, next question. How would you work to improve the infrastructure of the city, and where do you see gaps?
Wes, we didn't talk about this, but you want to
talk?
Yeah, that's easier first. Absolutely.
Well, you know, interestingly enough, this just came in one of the topics that we're talking about. And one of the key things that's up before the city commission right now, it's been being talked about for a while, is, you know, looking into the future, looking into the information requirements and what is available as far as an IT backbone for the city. A lot of the companies that are currently employed here, a lot of the institutions, like Rollins College, like Florida Hospital, require a high-density, high-capacity backbone to transfer data. That's just the world we live in. So coming up with a way to partner and do this smartly, we need to get a number of proposals coming forward, and there's a number of ways we can look at this. I have not seen formal proposals come forward yet, but there's the city doing it on its own. There's public-private partnerships. There's encouraging the private sector to come in and do that. If that relieves the tax burden on the citizens of Winter Park and gets us where we need to go, there's a right solution there, and we need to bring in the experts in those specific domains. And we do have some of them that live here with folks like Smart City and other companies like that who can help advise us on the way forward on this. You know, also, we always come around to traffic. Traffic's always an issue here in Winter Park. And the problem is, what is it that we actually control and what can we influence? And again, it's not just today. It's looking out 20, 30 years in the future. Because the traffic issues we have today will pale in comparison to what those traffic issues are 15, 20, or 30 years from now, if those predicted 1 million more people move into the Central Florida region. And that will be primarily on roads that surround and go through Winter Park, which are owned by the county or the state, and we have limited ability to actually control, but we can influence. Again, that's where the ability and the experience in partnering across jurisdictions, I think, comes into play. Now, we certainly have things that we can do, and we are doing, whether it be the Denning project, whether it be looking at expanding intersections appropriately to ease traffic burdens in high-density areas, whether it be improving the walkability of our city core and moving into multimodal transportation systems, as we've seen with Sunrail, which is going to allow some of those people to come transit through and in Winter Park. But we need to expand those things. I'm a biker, I'm a runner. I want to make sure that when I come down Park Avenue, I can get around without having to be worried about being hit. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed, but not everybody always stops at the stoplights. They sometimes roll through them downtown. And we need to make sure that we're using smart technologies to both move the traffic, protect the pedestrians in that city core, and make it more accessible for everyone. You know, and finally, I think a big part of protecting our infrastructure is protecting the tree canopy, making sure we're doing that correctly as a part of the charter. It is a part of the infrastructure of the park. The parks are a part of the infrastructure of the park. And we have to make sure that we're resourcing them appropriately and monitoring that resourcing and the execution of those efforts so that the investments we're making today do pay off, that we do not get in a position where large groups of folks are dying at the same time, that we are doing it very smartly so that we will have a sustainability within the work that we're doing for the city.
Thank you. And I'll just repeat the question, sort of when the question was here. How do you work to improve the infrastructure of the city, and where do you see gaps? You know, by trade, I'm a civil engineer, and, you know, some people might even call me a nerd because I get into the details of what's actually being done. And so when we look at the infrastructure needs within the city, one thing I tell people is that, you know, I do these plans for the DOT, I do them for Orange County, I do these plans for local governments, and I manage those projects as well as design these projects. And so all the details that have to go into that are something that you really need to understand so you can understand how to make the big picture work and you can understand how to get things done. So when I look here, what I think the infrastructure gaps are in our city, I agree with a lot of what my opponent has brought up, that we do need to look at the transportation issue. That's something I campaigned on 2 years ago. The undergrounding, which will help protect our tree canopy, is I try to explain to people that the undergrounding is an asset. That, you know, if you try to put a cost to, well, how much does it cost to underground? Well, okay, we can figure that out. But what is the benefit of having everything underground? What's the actual financial gain to the city? Well, our company we set up 12 years ago, set it up to figure those things out. So I understand the importance of these things. I understand the importance of the investment and how much we get back, not on a financial side, but also on a quality of life side. So that's something that, you know, when we look at that, it's, to me, the sooner it gets done, the better shape the entire city is going to be in, and the better our tree canopy is going to be. And the sooner we do it, construction costs are heading up. So if we bond it, that we can go ahead and get this done quicker and get it done at today's cost. I was at the Expressway Authority meeting the other day when they were discussing raising tolls. You know why they didn't raise the tolls? Because half of their financing is bonded and it's a fixed cost. So they were strategic in their planning, and they bonded what needed to be constructed, and they don't have to raise tolls because of it. So that's the type of thing that I'm looking at. Let's get these costs fixed, and let's not have to raise the cost to make sure this project is completed. The other items, you know, the smart transportation, the intersection improvements, you know, our firm's designing 3 intersection improvements right now in the Tallahassee and the Panhandle area. And so these are, I know what goes into an intersection improvement, I know what the right-of-way costs are, I know how to put these things together. So that's why I'm looking forward to our mobility plan that we're going to be coming out with, is finding out what these improvements are that can really help us spend less time sitting at the red light and more time in the places we want to get to here in the city. And let me just give you guys one last example of, I grew up in this area. My first engineering job was at PDC in 1985 on my Christmas break, where I was putting, back then, survey cross-sections into AutoCAD because computers had really just started to get involved in engineering design work. But I met with our staff to find out what was happening with the Duke undergrounding along Fairbanks. And we're supposed to underground the entire Fairbanks from I-4 to 1792. I found out that they weren't going to be undergrounding the first 300 feet because there were some issues at that intersection. Well, being that this is what I do, and I design electric to go underground on some of my projects, I said, well, this doesn't make sense. So I met with the DOT district secretary, and I also met with the folks from Duke Energy, and we're now going to have the entire length, I just found out a couple days ago, is going to be underground. So they're going to get that last 300 foot underground. So understanding those types of things, that's an issue that's going to make Fairbanks look that much better when you go off. It's going to look like you come into a city that cares about its trees, cares about its infrastructure, because the first thing you're not going to see is a 300 foot of high wire and then it ties it in between a couple of buildings within our city. So that's why we'll tackle that, is, each issue one at a time and make sure we do the right thing. Thank you.
All right. On to the next question. What do you see as one of the most pressing issues facing Winter Park, and how can Rollins be a part of the solution?
Development pressure is what I see as the biggest pressure facing the city of Winter Park. And that's why, smart development isn't just a phrase, it's actually doing smart development. We just did a zoning change on the west side so that they could put in a couple townhomes and a multi-family unit. Well, one of the things that I got involved with and tried to help is make it tie into is a single-family home. So we had a great transition there. And with that development, I talked to the architects, I met with them beforehand, I told them, this can tie better into the neighborhood if you do this, and the neighborhood will appreciate that. So it's, so being able to work with those people in the industry, I'm able to make sure that when development does come, that we don't lose the character of our city and things tie in, and they look like they fit. I mean, the worst thing you can do to a city is build something that doesn't look like it fits. If you guys remember Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the others, one of these things just doesn't belong. So to me, we need to make sure everything belongs like it's built here. And you have to excuse me with my glasses here, I did turn 50 this year. So, but, a lot of what we've had here is peer pressure to make sure that the builders aren't building out of character. And even if we don't have rules in place, the fact that everybody cares so much about it, nobody wants to be the builder that ruined the character of the city of Winter Park, because it might be hard to find work after that. So that's what I think that's an important thing. Rollins has been a champion of good development. Rollins has, their development that they've done here with the Hume House was one that was very contentious when it first came up, but they listened to the neighbors, and the neighbors, there's things have always not been the best in the neighborhood, but I know that, Rollins wanted to help address the neighbors' issues and build something that we all could be proud of. And if you look at what they've ultimately built up there, it fits into the street, it fits into the neighborhood, and all the neighbors I talked to say, yes, that's a nice building, it's much better than what was there. They currently have another one up before us that, again, it's over by the railroad tracks by Fiddlers. It's, there's a lot of concern on what's going to happen there. We've got to evaluate all the issues. I've been talking to the neighbors, walking the streets, asking what their concerns are. And because I do development work, I'm able to, understand what their concerns are, picture it, and then maybe offer them a different perspective on it. Or I agree with them. And sometimes I agree with the folks that are doing the development, and that's when it's hard to make a decision about how you vote yes or no on something. But I think overall, when you look at Rollins has done, they're a beautiful campus and they're a great asset, and so I look forward to working with them on many more projects when I get reelected. So, thank you.
Mr. Naylor?
Thank you. I think one of the key parts of public service is listening, and listening to the voice of the community, to hear what they think the problems are. And when I decided to run, that's what I did. And when I started talking to my neighbors, started talking to the parents groups at my daughter's school. And without doubt, the number one issue that emerged was there was a concern about rising crime. There was really the perception among our friends and our acquaintances and people who I've talked to personally who've had experiences of their car being broken into 3 times in 4 months. My daughter goes to St. Martin Mary at the end of the school. And 2 years ago, there was a child predator who was spotted over there. So that raised to the top of our list. Obviously, we've had some horrific tragedies here. And we've recently had an occurrence where, someone thinks that it's okay to walk into the SunTrust Bank on Park Avenue on Friday afternoon and rob the SunTrust Bank. That's not in keeping with the character of Winter Park. That's not where we should be from a standpoint of safety and security. And when I think about what the core mission of local government is, it's that core mission, safety and security, because that's what everything else builds on top of. Whether it's economic development, whether it's people coming here wanting to do the right type of development, we need to make sure that people feel that they can walk down Park Avenue or they can walk through their neighborhood and that they're going to be safe and secure. Now, by a lot of other standards in other places, folks will look and say, well, it's not that bad in Winter Park. But things go in cycles. And we've been seeing an uptick in this. If you read Tim's newspaper, it's been on the front page numerous times in the last few months. The rising crime rates in Winter Park. Whether it's car break-ins, whether it's violent crime rates, the UCP reports just came out from the chief. And we are seeing rises in, with a couple minor declines in, I think, 2 areas. Now we're at an inflection point because we've got a new chief of police. And one of the first things I did when I decided to run is I wanted to sit down with the chief to discover what his approach to the challenges we're facing are. And I was pleased to hear that his thoughts are very much in line with mine. And a lot of it has to do with presence and encouraging our police force to be present outside the cars, along Park Avenue, in the neighborhoods, where they can be seen, not only by the bad guys, but by the good guys. I think that's a vital part, is to be able to have that sense of community where Officer Jim or Officer Sally is walking down the street. We know they're going to be there from 8 in the morning to midnight. So I think working to support our tremendous new chief and our force to make sure they're properly equipped, properly resourced, and that they have the right focus is one of the most pressing issues facing Winter Park. And as someone who has led a police force and been responsible for security in a number of places, I believe I have unique insight to that I can bring to bear. And I'm hoping that I can add that in the City Commission.
All right. So what role do you think education serves in our city, and how would you improve it?
Much of Winter Park was built around Rollins College. It really is the genesis of the city. So education and learning are absolutely central to what Winter Park is. As I said, I'm fortunate that I'm a student here. Hopefully I won't be a student that much longer. Hopefully I'll get my dissertation done here and get to walk across the stage in a couple of months. But the ability to have an asset like Rollins College here is tremendous. Now, you never know exactly where that's going to reach out. But I moved my mother down here about 6 months ago from the Northern Virginia area. And one of the first touches she had with the city of Winter Park and the community was having technology buddies from Rollins College come over and teach her how to set up her Facebook account so that she could acclimatize to a new community and reach out and start making friends. And I know that's just a small touch point, but Rollins has a tremendous history of social involvement in reaching out in charity spheres and reaching out in the education domains to add to the value of this community. And I think we're exceptionally fortunate to have an asset like Rollins in our community. Again, it's an inflection point for Rollins. We have tremendous new leadership here with the Cornwells, Dr. Singer as the new provost, Dr. Crown as the new dean of the Cromer Business School. And I know that all of them are looking out for more ways to partner with our city to help bring to bear the tremendous resources of Rollins College. Now, we're not a school board, we don't run the schools here in Winter Park. So when you get to that education point, there's not that much control we have over curriculum or the actual day-to-day function of the schools. That lies with Orange County and then with the public and private schools that are here as well. But again, it comes to the point of, from the State Commission standpoint, how do we help enable their success? How do we look into our community and partner with the tremendous science and technology firms and make STEM a priority? How do we push things that are truly important to how our students are going to develop, like anti-bullying? That is something that the city of Winter Park can definitely invest in and be a part of, because that builds citizens for life. What our kids, what my 10-year-old is learning from the time she entered school about how we treat people, how we allow ourselves to be treated. That's at the core of who we are as a community. That's at the core of what Rollins is as a college. And I think there's a tremendous partnership and a tremendous opportunity with all the new leadership that's in place for us to figure out how we move those even more strongly forward, and how we do partnership with the Orange County Public School System to make sure that our city is supporting them as well in those efforts. So, as a lifelong learner myself, obviously Rollins makes those opportunities available to everyone in this community as well, whether it's the Bach Festival, whether it's the Winter Park Institute. I mean, education, lifelong learning, the things that are available in the city, again, it adds to the quality of life and why people want to live here. And whatever we on the City Commission can do to help foster those relationships is at the core of getting Winter Park to remain the great place that it is.
So just a real quick question, what role do you think education serves in our city? How would you improve it? Winter Park residents highly value education. It's shown in our schools here, how good our schools is, our PTA groups. But one thing I understand our education system is that, the fact that I'm local here and I've had my children start out at the Winter Park Day Nursery and then go to Audubon Park and then go to Glenridge and now go to Winter Park High School. I understand what our education system is. I also had my daughter go to Lake Highland Prep for a few years. So, the city of Winter Park values education. I just learned today, meaning that there's 5 ABET accredited universities within our area, which is, that's incredible. It's testament to Rollins and all the other schools here. But, education starts at a younger age. On the commission, I've pushed for increasing funding for not just the Winter Park Day Nursery, but also the Welborn Day Nursery. And so I think my future starts with my kids. And when I say my kids, I mean our kids. And I mean our village raising our kids to be productive citizens in our society. And so I got involved early on when my daughter was going to Audubon Park. I would go meet with Trevor Hinahan because he thought smartphones were the way we need to educate our young kids. And all I was finding out was my daughter was learning all these things at a young age that I didn't think she should be learning. So that was part of the reason she ended up going to Lake Highland, was so that she wouldn't be exposed to those. And recently, this past summer, when I went to meet with Trevor, he told me they now banned all the smartphones at middle school because they found them too distracting. So early on, it was something that I know as a kid, if you put a math book in front of me or a video game in front of me, which one am I going to open? I'm going to open the video game because I'm a kid. And so, so getting involved is something that I've done. I've been on the school advisory committee at Glenridge Middle School. One of the things that we had an issue with was the rising 5th graders coming from some of the elementary schools, because we have a lot of bilingual students, I'll call them, because English isn't their first language. They're also at the lower income levels. And so we talked about this at the SAC meeting, and what I proposed was the summer camp to help those students catch up to the 6th grade reading level, so they would come in the 6th grade and be able to go right to work. And so that was able to be implemented by others. I didn't implement it, but the folks that were there knew people that could do it. And so that was something that I was able to do to help that. So, as far as what we can do, assistant education as a resident, you can do a lot by getting involved. As a commissioner, you can support the things the school is doing. The new track that's out there, the new football field that's out there, taking pride in the school, working with Orange County, working with Rollins College. I mean, we redid that field because Rollins is a great partner. Rollins gets to use that field as well as our school students. So that's a great partnership that we've got this new athletic field that Rollins will use and us. It's a good use of space. And then, the other items we track. We restored our track to be meet ready so we can host state meets at our school now. So that's something else that brings pride to our area. So, just getting the word out that Winter Park cares about education and then actually acts on it by helping the schools and being a resident and getting involved is what we do.
So in some way, both of you have discussed the importance of community involvement in our local government. What are your plans to do that? And do either of you have specific ideas for involving younger residents on city boards or task forces or things along those lines?
Yeah, back to you. We have some pretty incredible young people in Winter Park in this 18 to 35-year-old group. And part of that is because Rollins College is here. And, we get not just the people that are full-time students, but the people going to the business school, the people going to night schools. And, one of the things that the mayor has done, and I think this is a fine thing to do, is he's actually appointed, I think, a Rollins student to one of our boards. But the idea of actually having them on the board, in my opinion, we are appointing people to our boards that have the experience. So instead of appointing them to the boards, what I would think Rollins could do is appoint them as interns to the board. So they would go to those board meetings, they would have a sponsor that would sponsor them, help them understand what the issues were, the things that they were explaining, explain to them how the decisions are being made and why it's an issue and why it's not an issue. And then at the end of that intern could then give a report to that person that showed what they had learned during that time period. The board that I was on was a utility advisory board. We had people with 30 and 40 years of experience working at electrical companies that really understood how the electric companies work. And so for students to be able to be exposed to that but not have the pressure of being an active board member and worrying about, are they saying something that's, because they don't have the experience, that it doesn't match up. And so, I think that internship program would make it less stressful for the student, but also make it where they can actually interact more and have good, because they have that sponsor that would look after them and make it a better experience for everybody. Thank you.
Mr. Davis?
I think that legal voters should have the opportunity to serve as a full member of a commission. I worked with the challenges of multi-generational workforce in my last position where we had 4 different generations. And everyone was very concerned that because of the demographic shifts that we were seeing in the workforce, that we were going to be losing all this knowledge, that all this knowledge was leaving, and where were we going to be as a workforce? As we really bored down into it and looked at it, the question was not knowledge, because a lot of our rising engineers, a lot of our rising contracts officers, a lot of our rising program managers and logisticians actually had tremendous technical knowledge. In many cases, better than folks who had been in the workforce for an extended period of time because of a shift in how work is being done. Now, what we did have as a challenge was wisdom transfer. Because if you break it down to a very simple equation where knowledge plus experience equals wisdom, that was something that we were losing. We were losing people that knew how to make the system work. But what we found was by bringing in and empowering more young engineers, more young program managers, that we were getting better solution sets because they were bringing to bear tools that are more seasoned workforce had not even thought of or had become familiar with. I look at it the same way at the city level. It's a different world than what I grew up in. And in many ways, I'm a little envious. When I was a junior in college, the thought of me starting my own company and rolling it into an IPO and being a millionaire or billionaire by the time I was 25, I mean, that was just a pipe dream. You went, you did your indoctrination, you got your degree, you signed up for a company for 30 years, and when your time came, then you were allowed to contribute. It's a different world today. You all are contributing from where you sit today. You all are involved in international efforts. If you look out in Central Park, if you know the story behind the Peacock Project, it was an Eagle Scout. An Eagle Scout candidate who put together a tremendous project and fundraiser that's not only added to the beauty of Central Park, but to the sense of community. Because it told a wonderful story of friendship and a wonderful story about how young people can contribute and make a meaningful change in our community. I think that's what we should be reaching out for. If you look across universities, students are participating. If you go out to UCF, and I gotta be honest with you, I don't know here at Rollins, I probably should, but there are student members of the board at UCF who are contributing. We can contribute at a second largest university in the United States. I think we can certainly expect our younger in age citizens to be able to successfully contribute here as a part of the city, because it's your future, it's the future of the city. Your voice should absolutely be heard.
All right. So could each of you offer a concluding statement about what you would bring to this role and why voters should choose you?
Do you want to say anything, please? Yeah, I was going to do, we'll take some questions at 6 o'clock. We're finishing at 6:30. Did you want to do questions if we had time? At 6 o'clock, I didn't know.
If you don't like
I'm
to.
going to talk 15 minutes, my conclusion.
Oh, yeah. So we can if you all would like.
What we going to do, I'm okay to take either way, but
Okay.
We can
Does
take a
that-
poll, who wants us to wrap up? And who wants
Questions, please.
Okay, who has a question?
In the last go-round there was a question about participation in city boards. And city boards have a lot of power. Currently, the city boards are appointed by one person and the process is not transparent. If elected or re-elected, what would you do to change that and make city government more accessible? And I'm going to add on to that question and say forums like city commission meetings and board meetings are often held during business hours when many residents are at work and are unable to participate. Would you guys support the idea of maybe making some city commission meetings on weekends or later in the evening to make it more accessible for citizens to be participating in our government versus basically a small, like you two are both self-employed and have more flexibility in schedule than someone who works at a 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 job, or really 7 to 6 like many of us do. So that's my question.
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. I would tell you that my background, most recently where I was employed, is one that absolutely pushes for the maximum amount of transparency possible. When I came into non-TSD, we had a very siloed and very secretive process internal to the organization where department heads didn't even see each other's budgets because everybody was trying to control information because they could keep what was theirs if no one else knew what was going on. In fact, Carolyn and I had a conversation about this when we sat down one day. And we both talked about